Today we're talking about requests for production and responses to requests for production in an Oregon family law case. My name is Ray Churba. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Oregon, and I litigate family law cases for the Center for Nonprofit Legal Services. Okay, so when we talk about production, we're talking mainly about the exchange of documents. You have the right to ask for documents from the other side. They have the right to ask for documents from you. When I talk about a request for production, I'm talking about a document that lists the documents that the sender wants from the recipient. And when I talk about a production package, I'm talking about the way you answer a request for production. You answer a request for production by giving to the sender your production package, which includes the responses to their request for production and the responsive documents. The responsive documents are the documents that have been sought and that are being turned over. So responsive documents can be like text messages or pay stubs, whatever goes into the package. This topic is important because a request for production is a good way to get the evidence that you need to win your case. But this process is technical. The rules are complex, they are hard to understand, and it is very important that you do this the right way because bad things can happen if you do it the wrong way or you don't answer a request for production correctly. So in this video, I'm going to try to give you the information you need to do it right. Okay, this process is governed by the Oregon Rules of Civil Procedure. I would encourage you to look at Rules 36 and 43. We're also going to have a look at Oregon Revised Statute 107.089. So in terms of what kinds of documents are typically sought in a family law case, in custody and parenting time cases, it's usually documents regarding the kiddo, child support, income documents, and dissolution cases involve a wider variety of documents because in dissolution cases, you are dividing debt and assets. So let's have a look at 107.089. Now, this statute only applies to dissolution cases. It does not apply to custody or parenting time cases. And you can see categories A through J, there is a lot of information here. So if you have a dissolution case, you probably should be looking at this statute, getting this stuff together. If the other side asks for disclosure under this statute in a dissolution case, it is required that you provide it. So there's that. Now, how long do you have to respond to a request for production? Well, under Oregon Rule 43, it's a minimum of 30 days. Sometimes it can be longer. It is really important that you are not late answering a request for production. If you are late, you can waive your objections and lose them forever, in which case you might be handing over documents which you otherwise would have been able to object to. You can also open yourself to a motion to compel, which is when one side goes to the court and says, hey, we sent a request for production to the other side. They didn't answer it timely. We would like you, judge, to order them to answer our request for production. Successful motions to compel frequently come with awards of attorney fees, and those awards can be substantial. So the best thing to do is to make sure that you get the other side your production package on time. Now, one thing I want to say about requests for production, if you've ever seen one of these things, they can be intimidating because attorneys put extraneous stuff in there. Frequently, there's a definition section or language that says, hey, you need to do this, and if you don't do this, all this terrible stuff is going to happen to you. But don't be intimidated by that stuff because at its heart, a request for production is a request for documents and information. So just find the list of what they want in the request for production and respond to that. If you answer all the requests that they make and you do it on time, you're going to be just fine. Okay, so how do you respond to a request for production? How do you create a production package? What goes into it? Well, there's two things that go into a production package. you have to answer, you have to respond to each request they make. So if you get a request for production that asks for 15 kinds of documents, you have to write a response to each of those 15 requests. And then you will take the responsive documents that you have, the documents that they have asked you for that you have that you want to give to them, and you will put them together with your responses to the request for production, and that is your production package. Now, one point I want to make is that in Oregon, there is no duty to create documents. So it doesn't matter what they ask you for. You do not have to sit down at your computer and create a document because they asked you for something. You don't have to do that. What you do have to do is you have to hand over everything that is in your possession, custody, and control. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about that. And let's talk about that in terms of bank records, because bank records are asked for in very frequently. They're asked for in almost every case. Now, nobody usually has bank records sitting around their house, right? So probably they're not in your possession or your custody. But these days, just about every financial institution has a website where the user can easily go on there and print up bank records from the past few years. So if you can do that, are those records in your control? Well, probably they are. And that's the way most courts look at it, as bank records are in your control. So if you get a request for your bank records, probably you should go online to your bank and just print up the records that were asked for and hand them over. Now, we can contrast that to a request for, say, a credit report. Well, theoretically, you might be able to get a credit report by going on the website of a credit reporting agency. But is that going to be as easy as getting your bank records? Probably not, because there's probably going to be more to it. So if you get a request for your credit report, is that in your control? Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know, I mean, only a court can answer that question. But what I know is that if you get a request like that for your credit report or something else that is not in your possession or custody, and you don't feel like it's in your control and you don't want to hand it over, you better answer that request for production, and you better address that request and say, hey, there are no documents in my possession, custody, or control. Okay, so how do you write your responses to all the items that they request from you? And that is governed by Oregon Rule of Civil Procedure 43. And this is one of the really nice things about the rules in Oregon. There are only 5 answers that are allowed. So for each class of documents that they ask you for, you are going to give them one of these 5 answers. And let's go through them. Number one, simple. The item you asked for is attached. You asked for it, here it is. Number two, the item you asked for is not attached, but will be provided within the allowed time. So this is if you're giving the production package, but you don't quite have a document that they asked for, but you know you're going to get it within the time allowed. So you just say number two. Number three is very important. A reasonable effort has been made to obtain the items not in my possession or custody. So let's say they ask you for a tax return that they have the right to look at, but you don't have it. You have to go to the IRS or to your accountant, and you know that you're not going to be able to get that tax return by the time your production package is due. So you answer number three. You say, hey, I have made a reasonable effort to obtain that tax return. It is not in my possession or custody. I will give you more information when it becomes available. And now you have answered the request for production. You have effectively got yourself an extension. You just have to follow through and tell them, hey, here's the document. I got it late, but here it is. Or, maybe despite my efforts, I wasn't able to get it. Number four, no documents exist that are within my control. So if they ask you for a list of all the stock certificates that you have and you don't have any stocks, you just say no documents exist. Number five, I object. And in the state of Oregon, if you object, you are required to state whether you object to the whole request or which portion of it, and you are also required to state the basis for your objection. And that's it. Those 5 answers. So every For each request that you get, you're going to answer one of these five answers. You're going to combine those answers with your production, with your responsive documents, and that is your production package. Okay, now getting back to the objection, what are some objections? Well, here are some objections that I just threw together. This is not an authoritative list. If you have questions about a specific objection, you might want to Google it and check it out further. Okay, so now you know what goes into your production package, your responses to their requests and your responsive documents. But how do you put it all together? Well, Rule 43 says the items that you provide must be organized and labeled to correspond with the categories in the request. And that's really all the rule says about how to put your production package together. So this is kind of a personal decision. I can tell you how I do it. If I get a request for production with where they're asking for 15 types of documents, I take 15 pieces of paper and I just write the answer to each request on a separate piece of paper, put those 15 pieces of paper together, and then I sandwich in whatever responsive documents I have behind the appropriate answer, and that is my production package, which I then give to the other side. Now, if you would like to take a look at a sample uh, package that I made that contains a fictional request for production and response to that request for production, you can download the PDF. I have put that in the description below, so you can just download that and take a look at it if you want. Okay, so that's pretty much it. But some final thoughts. You can deliver your production package or your request for production in person, by mail, or email. Most delivery is done these days by email. That's the best way to do it. It creates a permanent record. Um, if they're asking for ESI, like financial information in an Excel database or something like that, and you're not sure how to give it to them, you might want to talk to the other attorney about that. And in terms of redacting information that you provide to the other side, you can redact personally identifiable information that's not relevant to the case, like social security numbers or birth dates, PINs or passwords, but you cannot redact financial information or information that is otherwise relevant to the case. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you all for watching. Good luck in litigating your case, and I will see you in court.